And that's what President Trump is trying to do here.
I mean, okay. All right. Here he is trying to moderate it, okay? He is trying to moderate it. Okay, this is... All right, here is the CNN exclusive. You don't see all the things that lead up to this. Rubio defends Trump, okay?
And my source tonight is the Secretary of State who is in that room today, Marco Rubio. Thank you so much, Secretary Rubio, for being here. We just heard from President Zelensky. He said he does not think that he owes President Trump an apology for what happened inside the Oval Office today. Do you feel otherwise?
I do, because you guys don't see, you guys only saw the end. You saw what happened today. You don't see all the things that led up to this. So let me explain. The president's been very clear. He campaigned on this.
Yeah, the take I've always had is finally the most pro-Ukraine take in liberals' eyes, because they have arrived at my conclusion years later. Okay? After years and years of yelling about how I love Adolf Putler with out-of-context clips that I found out later were directly advocating for the exact opposite thing that they claimed I was advocating for, by the way. And moments where I like lose my on a chatter and respond to them for 10 seconds, as though that in and of itself is indicative of the, hundreds of hours of commentary on this process. Finally, they've also arrived at the conclusion that like maybe a ceasefire could be a good opportunity, and they're like shedding their delusion on this, or maybe even recognizing that America has been using and abusing Ukraine because they're not interested in Ukrainian emancipation, but simply interested in making money, lo and behold, and also, undermining a foreign adversary. That finally they've arrived at the similar conclusion that I've had. So now they can turn around and say, "Oh, wow, you're pro-Ukraine, I guess."
He thinks this war should have never started. He believes, and I agree, that had he been president, it never would have happened. Now here we are. He's trying to bring an end to this conflict. We've explained very clearly what our plan is here, which is we want to get the Russians to a negotiating table. We want to explore whether peace is possible. They understand this. They also understand that this agreement that was supposed to be signed today was supposed to be an agreement that binds America economically to Ukraine, which to me, as I've explained, and I think the president alluded to today, is a security guarantee in its own way, because we're involved. It's now us. It's our interests. That was all explained. That was all understood. And nonetheless, for the last 10 days, in every engagement we've had with the Ukrainians, there's been complications in getting that point across, including the public statements that President Zelensky has made. But they insisted on coming to D.C. This agreement could have been signed 5 days ago, but they insisted on coming to Washington. And there was should have been a very clear understanding. Don't come here and create a such scenario where you're going to start lecturing us about how diplomacy isn't going to work. President Zelensky took it in that direction, and it ended in a predictable outcome as a result. It's unfortunate. That wasn't supposed to be this way, but that's the path he chose. And I think, frankly, sends his country backwards in regards to achieving peace, which is what President Trump wants at the end of the day, is for this war to end. He's been as consistent as anyone can be about what his objective is here.
But what specifically do you want to see President Zelensky apologize for?
Well, apologize for turning this thing into the fiasco for him that it became.
Real psycho hours, dude. We've devolved so much. It's crazy. What should he apologize for is a great question here. And the answer always is just like basically nothing. Okay. It's just like, oh, he should not have responded at all. Okay. Like the very fact that he's there over and over again, thanking the administration like a million times over, thanking them over and over and over and over and over again. Like, what more? What do you want? He's just been eating it. Like, what is really messed up that he didn't get on his hands and knees and beg? It's also interesting to see Marco Rubio say this, because he's supposed to be the reasonable war hawk, okay? Obviously, when you're in the Trump administration, reason kind of goes out the window. But on the one hand, Marco Rubio is supposed to manage the direction, manage the trajectory of the allegiances, and basically turn around and be like, oh, Trump didn't mean it like that. But it does seem like they're just actively going after Zelensky and saying he is at fault here. So I guess, I don't know. We're just cutting Ukraine off completely. I don't know what the hell's going on. Like, is there a realignment happening? Who
There
knows?
was no need for him to go in there and become antagonistic. Look, this thing went off the rails. You were there, I believe. It went off the rails when he said, let me ask you a question to the vice president. What kind of diplomacy are you talking about? Well, this is a serious thing. I mean, thousands of people have been killed, thousands. And he talks about all these horrible things that have happened to prisoners of war and children, all true, all bad. This is what we're dealing with here. It needs to come to an end. We are trying.
It's crazy. Yeah, okay. You explain all of that. Not to be too libbed up here. Not to be too libbed up here. But if you explain all of that, how do you also simultaneously explain Donald Trump being like, and all of that is the fault of Zelensky? How does that make sense? Like, I don't understand it. What do you, even if your position is that Ukraine bit off more than it could chew with Russia, okay? And really egged on Russia and you know, found itself too comfortably in the bosom of Western empire when it's supposed to be like the boundary, the Russia's red line in perpetuity that the NATO allies also understand. Okay? Even if that's your position, how the that's still Zelensky's fault? At that point, you should be blaming previous administrations, but you can't do that because Donald Trump also was a previous administration president. And in the process, he, you know, continued the same foreign policy perspectives with respect to Ukraine. So for that reason, you can't really say previous administrations really it up too, which is why you arrive at this situation where you have to blame Zelensky, the most insane position you can arrive at. That's it. That's it. That's literally it. Okay. How do you defend saying JD saying, have you said thank you enough? What an insane thing to say. Yeah, I know. It's not only awful in terms of form, like it was just so gross of him to say that, but it was also so stupid. Like you're like, who are you? You're not even here. Like you're not even a part of this admin, little bro. Okay. You're just kind of here as like Peter Thiel's blood boy who just communicates all the secret closed door meetings back to him directly.
Trying to bring it to an end. The way you bring it to an end is you get Russia to the table to talk. And he understands that attacking Putin, no matter how anyone may feel about him personally, forcing the president into a position where you're trying to goad him into attacking Putin, calling him names, maximalist demands about Russia having to pay for the reconstruction, all the sorts of things that you talk about in a negotiation. Well, when you start talking about that aggressively, and the president's a deal maker, he's made deals his entire life, you're not going to get people to the table. And so you start to perceive that maybe Zelensky doesn't want a peace deal. He says he does, but maybe he doesn't. And
dog, why is he there then? Why is he there? You guys have legitimized denying actual truth. No, why is Zelensky there to begin with? Clown Lensky's a corrupt puppet and war criminal. He and his EU-US cosmopolitan globalist backers are scared of a ceasefire killing their cash cow, dreams of color revolutions, and ruin the endless destabilization of the whole region. He feeds on chaos. A ceasefire means his political death. Stop being a skibbity toilet. Dog, I don't even know where to begin to address this. Okay? Donald Trump is literally the EU-US cosmopolitan globalist backer. He is that guy. What do you think his solution is here? Like what? No, this is such an insane thing to say. Donald Trump is the president of America. He is not a Maoist third worldist, dude. Wake up. Okay? No, I will be skibbity. And you need to stop phantom taxing. Okay? I will be so skibbity. I will stick out my gat for the Rizzler. Stop it. What are you saying?
And that active
like, dude, Unk, you're washed. You brain rot isn't convincing. Okay. The question I always have for these guys, is this. Okay. If Donald Trump is not this like globalist guy, he's a real isolationist, why is he advancing the Brandonian agenda of Saudi nuclearization and potentially even sending troops to Saudi Arabia to protect Saudi Arabia and troop escalation in the region that he has not scaled back on, and as a matter of fact is giving Israel quintillions of dollars of weapons, just like Biden did? Why is that the case? Can one of these MAGA communists respond to this question? Can someone explain to me what the Maoist third worldist position of Donald Trump is? And you know, how did that happen? How do you square that circle? Explain that to me. Why is he just deep-throating Benjamin Netanyahu on a daily basis? How does that work?
Open undermining of efforts to bring about peace is deeply frustrating for everyone who's been involved in communications with them leading up to today. And I think he should apologize for wasting our time for a meeting that was going to end the way it did.
You yourself have said previously that Putin cannot be trusted in negotiations. That was the point that President Zelensky was ultimately making during that conversation, is that there cannot be an agreement without security guarantees, because he was talking about all the ceasefire agreements before, or agreements that Putin has just blown past. I mean, do you still feel that way, that Putin cannot be trusted in these negotiations?
Well, I was there yesterday when the president said in front of the media that our...
Yeah, this is also... The liberal position here is also kind of silly, too, because, like, when you're in the midst of, like, securing a ceasefire deal with the other party, yeah, you're not going to constantly talk about, like, how they can't be trusted. They can't be trusted. Like, what do you mean? That's the one aspect of Trump's commentary that if he wasn't an insane person, I would understand. I'd be like, yeah, you can't, like, we get it. Okay? I understand. Yes, Vladimir Putin can't be trusted. Okay? I know. Trust me. I know. Look at the last 3 years. But the point is, if the options in front of us are unlimited battle and trench warfare, as both parties are just butting heads in the meat grinder, okay, and a conditional ceasefire agreement that might actually fall apart once again because of destabilization from the Russian side, then you go back to square one. That's it. You go back to permanent war. That's it. That's it. That is literally my argument, and was my argument when liberals used to get mad at me all the time. They were like, appeasement. You're doing appeasement. You're doing appeasement to Russia when you say you want a ceasefire. It's like, no, dude. I see the situation. I see the writing on the wall. When it comes to nuclear arms, when it comes to nuclear nations, the dynamic is very different. There's a reason why there is no no-fly zone over Ukraine. Why do you think there is no no-fly zone over Ukraine right now? Ukraine wanted it. It's a perfectly understandable desire. Why is there none? Think. That's because two nuclear-armed nations are not going into conflict with one another because the nukes will start flying.
Our approach is going to be trust but verify. President Trump's made deals his entire life. He's not going to get suckered into some deal that's not a real deal. We all understand this. We understand it on our end for certain. And so the goal here is to get to a place we have to explore whether peace is possible. I've said this repeatedly. I don't know. I think it is, based on what they've said so far, but we have to explore that. How else is this war going to end? I ask people, what is the European plan to end this war? I can tell you what one foreign minister told me, and I'm not going to say who it was, but I can tell you what one of them told me, and that is that the war goes on for another year. And
Bro pointed to his ear. When he said one of them told me, he meant he actually heard them from 7,000 miles away, actually. Okay? My man's got satellites on him, dude. This is crazy work. He's like, yeah, one of them told me, as in they were talking in a private meeting 7,000 miles away in an underground bunker, and I heard it.
At that point, Russia will feel so weakened that they'll beg for a peace. That's another year of killing, another year of dying, another year of destruction. And by the way, not a very realistic plan in my point of view. So if there's a chance of peace, even if it's a 1% chance, that needs to be explored. And that's what President Trump is trying to do here.
I mean, okay. All right. Here he is trying to moderate it, okay? He is trying to moderate it. Okay, this is... okay, the last part of this, he stuck the landing, okay? He did. He flubbed in the beginning, but ultimately the damage control implies... This is why I said what Rubio says is more significant than what Trump says in the meetings. Because while they have to defend Donald Trump's feelings, which is such an insane thing to say, but he is an incredibly emotional person and very thin-skinned, and these guys have to basically play ball with a psycho, okay? Marco Rubio is old school politician, and that's the reason why he's in charge of the State Department. So what he says, I think, is more important than what Donald Trump says. So while the first part of this was just like basically saying like, oh, you know, Zel Disney is corrupt, or, you know, he should have groveled further or whatever. Then he turns around and is like, but, you know, we have to give peace a try. We have to do, no matter what the alternative is, this is what we're going to do. This is what this admin is going to move forward with.
President Trump said just when he was leaving the White House after that meeting that he doesn't think President Zelensky wants peace. But isn't that why the Ukrainian leader was in the Oval Office for that meeting?
Great question by Caitlin Collins. Is correct. My question as well.
Today?
Well, he was in the Oval Office to sign a minerals rights deal. That's what he was in the Oval Office to sign today. But again, when you have comments that deliberately appear to be I mean, after having discussed this repeatedly, deliberately appear to be geared towards making the argument that peace is not possible. You know, again, he turns to the vice president. What kind of diplomacy are you talking about? Almost as if to say, these people, you can't deal with them. You can't have any negotiations with Putin because he can't be trusted. And you're.
There's not, no. No, brother, then he wouldn't have showed up. Like, what are we talking about, man? What are we talking about? They are trusting Putin, so stupid. No, Marco Rubio's statement there is not incorrect. Even if there's a 1% chance that there could be a ceasefire, we have to take it, is not incorrect, especially when, as the head of the State Department, he's also laying out the truth of the matter in terms of what the battlefield looks like. Okay? He's saying that, look, read between the lines. Understand that this is not a normal cabinet, okay, where Donald Trump will both be brutally honest and very ruthless in times and demonstrate American ruthlessness in broad daylight, but also is very narcissistic and kind of short-tempered and short-sighted, so much so that he will fuck up a ceasefire deal that that his people, the Marco Rubios of the world, put together. Okay? Trump administration wants public apology from Zelensky to mend relations after Oval Office clash. Bloomberg. He is literally lying about what Zelensky said and wants, though? Yes, I know. The reason why he's lying about what Zelensky said and wants is because, one, we don't give a fuck about our proxies. We don't give a fuck about our allies. He can just betray them and shit on them all day, every day. And two, he certainly has to play ball with Donald Trump. He has to play around Donald Trump's feelings. He has to run defense for Donald Trump. Because if he doesn't run defense for Donald Trump is going to be like, okay, you're done. You're a rhino. And his idiotic base is also going to be like, okay, I guess Marco Rubio was always a war hawk and a rhino. Because in some ways he is, I mean, he absolutely is a war hawk.
You're just wasting your time on negotiations. Well, he's directly, basically undermining everything the president has told him he's trying to do. Look, there's no need for that. You start to suspect, does he really want an end to this war? Does he just think that, you know, we have to do whatever he says and give him anything he wants without any end game? That was the Biden strategy. We were funding a stalemate. We were funding a meat grinder. And unfortunately, for the Ukrainians, the Russians have more meat to grind, and they don't care about human life. We've seen it, human waves, the North Koreans, etc. And so,
by the way, this, without the backdrop of Donald Trump's statements, this is what you would hear from a reasonable Republican. Like, not the first 5 minutes, okay? But this is what you would normally hear from a cabinet that was changing like that was trying to pack up the Ukraine situation, basically. A more polite approach to this would basically be, it's a meat grinder. Ukraine doesn't have enough manpower. Either they lower their age of conscription and also force European allies and the United States of America, or ask European allies and the United States of America to start deporting able-bodied Ukrainian men back to Ukraine so they can hold weapons and engage in this war of attrition, okay? Or we have to give peace a chance. That is what you would normally say, okay? And then the back and forth and the yelling at one another would probably happen behind closed doors, and then some leaker would explain to us that that is what happened behind closed doors, and then I would point to that leaker, and I would say, see, America doesn't give a Ukrainians, and then all of the liberals will yell at me and say I'm Adolf Putler lover. I'm Mr. Lover of Adolf Hitler. America does care about Ukrainian emancipation. And we would have this back and forth. The reason why we're not having that back and forth is because Trump is basically openly doing it in broad daylight. Why does he voluntarily go on CNN instead of pro-Trump media? What do you mean? Because this is him fixing Trump's insanity in his way. He's trying to do damage control. He's trying to give assurances to, you know, the military-industrial complex and the capital owners who still listen to CNN and aren't like brain-broken QAnon writers for MAGA world. Yeah, this is his attempt at trying to do damage control, but he knows that Donald Trump is going to hear him, and he knows he has to play a role here, and you know, spare Trump's feelings while simultaneously saying, like, these are the real reasons why we need to do a ceasefire.
So this is a very complex thing. It's very delicate. It's very costly. It's very bloody. It needs to be brought to an end, but it isn't going to be brought to an end with public pronouncements and maximalist demands in the public, but in real diplomacy. The vice president was right.
When you say they don't care about life, are you talking about the Russians or the Ukrainians?
Well, the Russians, I mean, they're conscripting by the hundreds of thousands. They brought in North Korean troops that were slaughtered in Kursk, and they keep going because they got more people. That's the other fact. Look, and it's, you know, again, we go back to the same point. I'm not going to fall into this trap of the who's bad and who's evil. People can make those conclusions. People have seen how this narrative is played out and where we are today and how this all started and so forth. The point now is it has to end. And the way it ends is you get people to a negotiating table, and the president, who's the ultimate deal maker, knows you don't get people to a negotiating table when you're calling them names and you're accusing them of things, because at the end of the day, this is not a political campaign, okay? This is high-stakes international diplomacy and an effort to bring about an end to a very, very dangerous war.
But you yourself, sir, have said before that you believe Putin is a war criminal, that is a widely accepted fact. You've called him a butcher. And you've said that as a Secretary of State, you do believe it's important for someone with such global influence as you have to speak with that kind of moral clarity.
Yeah, and at this moment, as Secretary of State, my job working for the president is to deliver peace, to end this conflict and end this war. Ultimately, that is the job of the State Department. The State Department doesn't fight wars, it ends them. It tries to end them. And that's usually, by the way, celebrated.
Okay, Cap.
I mean, throughout history, I've watched presidents.
The State Department doesn't start wars, it ends them. The American State Department, okay, dog. Security guarantee is what Zelensky wants. Yeah, the entire point of contention that should have been done privately, but is being done publicly, is that security guarantee is what Zelensky wants. Trump thinks mineral agreement is basically that because Putin wouldn't dare to Trump's money. Yes, exactly. And Zelensky thinks, for understandable reasons, no, Putin would definitely your money. And he would definitely go back to the drawing board and restart conflict. That's the point. That is the point of contention here. My point is, I don't give a fuck. I want people to stop dying, which is why I think for as long as you can commit to a ceasefire is a good thing, is a benefit. The notion that this gives Russia an opportunity to re-up and rearm and then pummel Ukraine further is silly. It's the same principle behind the Israeli-Palestinian ceasefire that was implemented, and I had the exact same position then, warning people that Israel most likely is going to re-up and rearm and likely pummel and permanently annex the West Bank. But it's still ultimately a good thing that people are not being slaughtered in the process. That was my position on Israel-Palestine, and it's the consistent position I have for Russia and Ukraine.
Is to bring about an end to wars and conflicts, and people celebrate that. They applaud it. I think we should be very proud and happy that we have a president whose prime objective is not to get into wars, but to prevent wars and to get out of wars. That is a very noble, laudable goal. Everyone should be applauding it, and he should be given the space to do that, not undermined by demands that he call Putin names or that we say things that impede the ability to conduct real diplomacy, as the vice president said today.
To follow up on what you just said a moment ago, are you saying that you have doubts that President Zelensky wants this war to come to an end?
What I have doubts about is whether he's willing to say and do the things that we need in order to get a negotiation. Again, you guys, this has been going on for 10 days. And, you know, to see things in the press saying we're not coordinating with the Ukrainians, that's absolutely false. Over the last 10 days, the Ukrainians have met with the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of State, the Vice President of the United States, had a phone call with President Trump, and he was in the Oval Office today. I've talked to the foreign minister of Ukraine 3 times in the last 10 days. The argument that we're not engaging, but yet you keep reading these press accounts about, oh, well, they're leaving us out. We're not involved. We're not engaged. None of these things are true, and it continues. So all that led up to today in a deep sense of frustration. And my hope is that this all can be reset and maturity can kick in and some pragmatism, because this war tonight, people will die in Ukraine. Tonight, people will die in this conflict. We're trying to bring an end to this conflict, which is unsustainable. It's an unsustainable, bloody war that has to come to an end. And right now, the only leader in the world that can even have a chance.
Even if Zelensky doesn't like the deal, it does not matter. Because America holds all the cards in this process, they are supposed to be more reasonable and not humiliate Zelensky and undermine him. Especially because, like, we're in the process of looting Ukraine. Like, what are we talking about? We are quite literally in the process of looting Ukraine. Everybody, every reasonable person, and I think Zelensky himself, understands the power dynamic here. Okay? So if every single person understands the power dynamic here, how the are you going to actively undermine your supposed ally in the process, your proxy in the process? Undermining and humiliating your proxy in the process undermines your standing. This is my point. Trump's ego is getting in his own way of actually securing a reasonable ceasefire negotiation. That's my point. He is such a man-child and so goddamn thin-skinned that even if he brought forth reasonable positions initially, it's impossible to say that he brought forth reasonable positions because it was sandwiched between insanely unreasonable shit that he was doing in terms of, you know, taking all of Ukraine's resources and also simultaneously bullying Zelensky. Like, he has more smoke for our proxy in this process than he does for the adversary. Okay? That's wild.
Of bringing about an end to this is named President Donald Trump. And we need to give him the opportunity to try and do that. And when you see efforts to impede it, when you tell someone, don't say, let's not talk about these things, let's not go in this direction because it makes it harder for us to engage, and they insist on doing it anyways, you start to wonder. I don't like to impugn people's motives, but you start to wonder what's behind it. So look, again, let's hope that this can be salvaged, but I'm not sure after today.
You don't believe that this can be, you're not
the
sure.
adversary is strong, the proxy is weak, so it makes sense? No, it doesn't make sense. And the reason why it doesn't make sense is because America is still stronger than Russia. I can't believe people are still saying, how is Ukraine a proxy to the U.S.? I'm losing my freaking mind, dude. Oh my God. I'm losing it. Like, if that was not the case, Zelensky would not be coming to the United States of America yesterday after Trump called him a dictator. Okay? Please. Donald Trump has been actively undermining Zelensky nonstop. And Zelensky, even after being kicked out of the White House, has been thanking him over and over and over again. Why do you think that's happening? The United States has been using Ukraine to fight against Russia. This is not a secret. This is what they have been openly stating. I don't know how people still at this stage refuse to recognize that when virtually every politician has actively said it. Okay? I saw a piece from Lloyd Austin who said as much. America is on the right side, being on Ukraine's side in this process, as I have said over and over again. Ukraine is the country that was wronged. It was invaded by a larger adversary. Russia is in the wrong. Ukraine is on the right. Having said that, however, America's interests with Ukraine are not for emancipatory reasons. It is not. And every single politician has basically recognized this reality and openly stated it. What's wild to me, however, is that even in this moment, people still act like that's not the case, and I don't understand.
Nate, let's face it, we're waging a proxy war. We're waging a proxy war, but we're not giving our proxies the ability to do the job. And for years and years now, we've been allowing them to fight with one hand tied behind their backs, and it has been cruel. It has been cruel, and we need now to give them what they need.
There's Boris Johnson, the great deal maker himself, the British deal maker. But it's not just that. Hold on. There's more. I mean, you got like the most reasonable heads, the most reasonable foreign policy heads, not even like the demented Brandon team. I'm talking like, you know, people who actually are in charge of the foreign policy. Also openly stating it. This is from an op-ed by Megan K. Stack. Okay. U.S. officials usually describe this war in noble terms, extolling their unflinching support, $175 billion worth, for heroic Ukraine in the fight against the monster Mr. Putin. Sometimes, though, they are blunter, such as when Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told reporters in Poland a couple months after the invasion that the United States wants to see Russia weakened. The comments suggested that the United States would weaponize Ukrainian patriotism and spend Ukrainian lives because of prolonged war. Even a war that could probably not be won suited U.S. interests in chipping away at Mr. Putin's staying power. This was 3 years ago. I believe it's right to call Ukraine a proxy war because I think it's reasonable to conclude that the Biden administration has supported the war not only in deference to righteous Ukrainian determination to fight off Russia, but also because the war was a chance to debilitate our enemy without directly engaging in it. Here is from the AtlanticCouncil.org. January 12th, 2023. The West reaps multiple benefits from backing Ukraine against Russia. Now, people will look to this stuff as not an admission, but as simply a way to sell the continued support to Ukraine because Americans are selfish. They will look to Joe Biden saying, "Oh, but we have artillery shell facilities in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Like all of the dollars that we're spending on Ukrainian defense is actually being spent in the United States of America to beef up United States of America contracting, like that's actually building our manufacturing capabilities," right? They say this. And people point to that and say, "Oh, it's because we want to it's because we want to sell it to Americans." No, those are actual moments of truth, brutal honesty. Okay? That is what the truth of the matter is.
Sure that this can be salvaged. I mean, can this relationship between Zelensky and Trump be repaired in your view?
I think anything is possible, but it has to go back to the point that President Trump is interested in being involved in this for the purposes of bringing about an enduring and lasting peace. That's what he wants to achieve. And I think if I'm a country, okay, that's involved in a war with a bigger country, who's losing thousands of people, who's had 3 million people leave my country because they can't be there, who is facing these challenges, I would be thanking a president who's trying to help bring about an end to this war. I would be thanking him, and I would be supportive of what he's trying to do, at least in my public pronouncements and in my public posture. And we didn't see that today, and we haven't seen that for the last few days. Now, will that change? I hope so. It should for the purposes of global peace and stability in Europe and around the world.
Do you think you can make the argument that he hasn't said thank you?
Well, I think the vice president said he hadn't said it today. He hadn't heard it today in that meeting, and we were.
He did. This stuff is so stupid. He did.
We're hoping that meeting would begin by thank you for everything you've done for us. We wouldn't be where we are today without you. We wouldn't even have a chance to negotiate a peace without the help you gave us. By the way, without the help you gave us when you were president in the first term, because President Obama refused to provide them defensive capabilities in terms of military hardware. He did provide him blankets.
Yeah, and
he
that
did
was
provide
brought
him
up today
humanitarian
during
aid.
that meeting.
And it was brought up, but I was there. In fact, I vividly recall at the time Vice President Biden saying to me in a meeting that we had at the Vice President's residence that the reason why we didn't want to provide them those weapons is because they might use them. That was his exact quote. And that was the attitude. I remember clearly then the Ukrainian leaders saying, we don't need more blankets or MREs. We need weapons to defend ourselves. And they didn't do it. President Trump did. He provided them weaponry, some of it, much of it, which was used at the beginning of this war. And without those weapons being in their stocks, this war could have been over very quickly, 2, 3, 4 days. Another pot shot that Zelensky took today, when the president pointed that out, you know what Zelensky said? He said, yeah, we've heard that from the Russians. That's not a Russian narrative. That was the official position okay, of the United States. I vividly recall being briefed by leaders in the Biden administration telling us that this war was going to be over in 5 to 6 days. They believed that that was their assessment at the time. And it wasn't the case because of the weapons that Ukraine had in its stocks because of President Trump in his first term. So he should have been grateful for that and grateful for what we're doing now. And one more point. It's not just President Trump. There's news reports out there from NBC News, at least is one of the places I recall, reporting that Biden had a shouting match with Zelensky for not being grateful and not being thankful for everything that was provided back in 2022. Now, that didn't happen in front of the press. That was leaked, but it got out there. These frustrations are not unique to President Trump. There was those frustrations in the previous administration, if NBC News is to be believed.
Right. But obviously we've never seen anything like what we saw today. But the point that Zelensky was making there is that everyone predicted his demise, and Ukraine was able to fight and to survive. Zelensky was able to survive. The Ukrainian people have been fighting for 3 years. You yourself have said previously that the United States should assist Ukraine as long as the Ukrainians are willing to fight. So I think the question coming out.
Why do people's brain break when you cover this issue? Very simple. American exceptionalism and unimaginable amounts of consent being manufactured in one direction from outlets and institutions that they care about, that they trust for years and years. It's a faucet of propaganda. And when you have a moment where that kind of breaks because Donald Trump is president again, people have two options. Either they desperately try to cling on to the old ways of thinking, or try to re-examine their biases and try to re-examine their social conditioning. And most people don't want to do that. That's it. Like, I don't think most liberals are thirsty for endless war all around the world. I think most Americans are not thinking about it like that. There are certainly, NATO heads on Twitter or whatever who reassert some semblance of American power, and that makes them feel powerful. If you dominate like weak enemies, vulnerable populations, then all of this stuff, the fact that I don't have healthcare means something, That's why they flex on Yemen and post about how, Yemen's going to learn today what it's like why we don't have healthcare, that sort of stuff. But most Americans don't think like that. I think most Americans are just looking at the situation and hearing over and over and over again that correctly Ukraine is on the right side and we're on the right side for once. Like, please let us have this. And that, we are bravely and boldly supporting our allies in this regard. And it's actually a selfless endeavor. That's the part that I think is like the biggest lie. The biggest lie that the media tells is that we're selfless. We've never been selfless. There's never been a moment like nation states don't engage in selfless, morally righteous acts. That is not the case. They only operate in the interest of whatever the interest of the nation state is. For America, it's capitalism. So obviously it's always going to be, we are always going to be beholden to capital owners, whether it be the military industrial complex or, any number of different corporate executive and corporate interests. Okay. But that's what it is.
Out of that meeting is what happens next year. I mean, you are the U.S. chief diplomat. Is there a path for diplomacy? Is a ceasefire still a possibility tonight?
Well, number one, you know who else said that Ukraine is very brave and very valiant? President Trump. He said it today. He said it repeatedly. Your soldiers have been very brave. Your fighters have been very brave. Your people have been very brave. He said that repeatedly. And everyone recognizes that. But we're 3 years into a war that has no end in sight and no exit strategy. The EU doesn't have an exit strategy. I saw the comments tonight from the leader of the EU saying there needs a new leader of the free world. I mean, these people are just playing silly games and saying these things. What is their exit strategy? What is anybody else's exit strategy? The only person on the planet who is actively trying to bring an end to this conflict is named Donald Trump, the president of the United States. He's the only one that's trying to do it. And we should be helping him to achieve it. And so do I think it's possible? Yeah, I hope it's possible, because that's what we do try to do at the Department of State, is we try to bring end to conflicts, not start new ones, and certainly not extend them.
Senator Lindsey Graham, after having lunch with President Trump today, said Zelensky either needs to resign or they need to send someone over that we can do business with. Do you feel that President Zelensky needs to resign?
Well, that's Lindsey's feeling because he feels very passionately. You know, he's been a very strong supporter of Ukraine. Lindsey Graham has been one of the strongest voices for Ukraine. Well,
Lindsey Graham is lower than dirt, okay? I don't no. Lindsey Graham does not care about a single Ukrainian life, okay? He does not care unless, you know, it's maybe someone he's having sex with, but that's besides the point. He only cares about maintaining loyalty to Donald Trump. He is a ginormous ass kisser. Lindsey Graham historically even turned around. He literally historically turned around and sucked up to Donald Trump after Donald Trump shit on his best friend. Okay? Shit on his best friend, the Maverick John McCain. He does not care. Okay? He is just a simple brown noser through and through. That's the only thing he cares about. Lindsey Graham only cares about Lindsey Graham and maybe Israel. He cares about Israel. He is not a principled person.
United States, the president's taken no position on that. What he said today is let him come back when he's ready to do peace. That's what he said. Let him come back when he's ready to do peace. So I can't speak for what anybody else said. I can only go off the words from the president of the United States, and that is today this is not going to be productive any further. When Zelensky's ready to make peace and he's serious about peace, let him come back then. And that's when we'll re-engage with them. And what he means by that is when he understands—
And how will you measure that?
Well, I think it's everything I've said already. And that is, how are you going to get Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation to a table to discuss even the opportunity, even to explore whether there's an opportunity for peace? You're not going to do it by calling them names. It makes everybody feel very good. You can pass resolutions. You can put out very strongly worded statements. Senators can do it. I did when I was in the Senate. House members can do it. Commentators can do it. And countries that have no real skin in the game can do it. But when you are the president of the United States of America and you're trying to bring about peace the way Donald Trump is trying to bring about peace, the only way to do it is you have to create space for people to come to the table and talk. And that is something we should all be applauding, not criticizing. And not pretending that we can just extend this war forever until and that everybody has unlimited resources to continue to fund it on both sides, by the way.
And President Zelensky has said he does want this war to end. He just cares about how it ends. We heard that from the other European leaders who came to the Oval Office also this week. President Trump said to me today, before that shouting match erupted in the Oval Office, that he doesn't believe there have to be security guarantees in place before the ceasefire, that you can come to a ceasefire agreement and then put those in place. Do you agree with that?
That's not what he said. What he said is, why am I going to be talking about security guarantees? Let me get a peace deal first, is what he said. That doesn't mean they can't happen as part of that negotiation, but you have to have an agreement to— what peace is there to secure if you first don't have an agreement on peace? Like, what do the Russians need in order to end this conflict? What do
So
the
you're saying it would
Ukrainians
happen
need?
as part of the negotiations?
Well, again, how do you end a war? You have to find out what the combatants require in order to stop shooting at each other. What are the Russians' needs? What do they need to see in order for them to stop fighting? What do the Ukrainians need in order to stop fighting? And then once you have that in place, then you can decide the next step, which is, and what do we need to do to make sure this never happens again? That it doesn't happen in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. I don't think President Trump is interested in a one-year ceasefire.
Okay, my takeaway from this, maybe people get mad at me for saying this, but my takeaway from this is that it seems like they're probably still going to go back and you know, continue with the ceasefire. They're going to get the mineral deal and continue with the ceasefire, and they'll do like back deal assurances to Ukraine that, like, of course, if you know, there's American contractors present there, then obviously, like, that will be the baked in security. Like, that's it. I love your optimism, but come on. I'm not giving you a prediction. Obviously, I would never make predictions on especially Russia related things. But I'm expecting they are doing a mineral deal and Trump will say it's an assurance, but Russia will break it and Trump will say nobody cares, and it will just end up like Gaza. I feel like Marco Rubio in outside of just don't everybody hyper focuses on Marco Rubio playing the role of defending Trump and like bullying Zelensky. And because of that, they don't hear the parts where he keeps saying, we have to do a ceasefire. We have to do a ceasefire. We have to come to the table. We have to do a ceasefire. And I think that that part is more significant. That implies that, either they're just going to cut Ukraine loose, which would be insane. They're going to continue with the pre-existing. They're going to continue with the pre-existing deal. I don't know. I don't even know how many minerals Ukraine even has. I feel like this is more so just like to sell this idea to the base that they're like getting something out of it, because Americans are deeply selfish. After years and years of saying Ukraine is bullshit, we shouldn't have given Ukraine a single dime, what are we doing? They're just like, oh yeah, we're getting something out of it, I promise, when they're not really getting too much out of it at all. Like, I think that they see it mostly as like a distraction from, the real villains, which is China. That lie is probably told towards Trump to make sure he does a deal. Yeah. Like, I don't know how many minerals we have to begin with in Ukraine. You feel me?
I don't think he's interested in a 6-month ceasefire. He wants this thing to end. He has said that repeatedly. But again,
don't know if you saw me post this earlier, but France announced that they were going to open up their arsenal for nuclear deterrence. I think that is like I think that right there is unironically a world destabilizing moment. Europe deciding to leave the American security partnership is I can't even comprehend what that would look like, especially without like cutting a deal with China or something. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know. I can't even close my eyes and imagine what that would look like, especially when you think about the historical precedent right there in terms of militarization in Europe. Okay, that's number one. And number two, I mean, a lot of their equipment is equipment that they bought from us, and maybe tweaked a little bit, if they have any equipment at all. Sean the Black, thank you for the raid. Hope you had a good stream.
he's not going to use the kind of language that maybe plays well in the public sphere or in the political sphere for people that want to take shots at him, but it's not going to allow us to have a negotiation or even to explore a potential negotiation. President Donald Trump is a man who's made deals his entire life in business, and he's bringing those principles to government, and he's the only one in the world that has any chance. If Donald Trump tomorrow decides, I don't care about Ukraine, I don't care about Russia, and I don't care about this war, and he walks away, I ask you, I ask everyone, well, who on this planet has any chance whatsoever, even a 1% chance of getting the combatants to the table? The answer is there is no one. He is the only one on earth right now that has any chance. If there is a chance at peace, he's the only one that has a chance to deliver on it.
Do you still see a meeting happening with President Putin there, President Zelensky, and President Trump? Is that still possible?
Well, I think that's premature. I mean, what would they? You first need to make sure that this is even a possibility, and you have to explore it. And look, there's good signs, I think, maybe, somewhat about at least the Russians' willingness to engage. And but we have to explore all that. But that's not going to be done in front of cameras. It's not going to be done in an open ballroom. There's a lot of work to be done before we get to this point. This is a complex war that has causes behind it that go back a number of years. There's a lot to navigate. A lot has been invested on both sides. Gains have been made by the Russian Federation in some places. All of these things have to be worked through, but it's not going to be done through press conferences and in the media. It has to be done through what the vice president said today, the serious work of diplomacy. It's a lot easier to just say, well, we're with Ukraine all the way, no matter what, however long it takes. Well, 15 years, 12 years? I mean, that's absurd. That's not sustainable, and everybody knows it. The president wants to end this war. He wants to explore whether there's a possibility to do it and do it quickly. He campaigned on it. It was a promise of his, and he intends to when he says these things, he doesn't just say them, he means them, and he's doing it. And it's the first time we've seen that in a long time in American politics.
Secretary,
what are the chances Trump will just go on meeting with Putin anyways, lift sanctions, let him do whatever in Ukraine for EU to deal with? That would be truly unprecedented. That is unironically.
We want to bring in
how NATO and American hegemony ends. Oh, I want to also get back to this ass kisser. To the hand-wringing Europeans who felt offended by President Trump rejecting being lectured by President Zelensky, be my guest. Defend Ukraine from Putin. It is long past time for the Europeans to show they're capable of defending their own continent. They've allowed their militaries to be hollowed out, and when Europe speaks, no bad guy listens. I say this with great sadness. The last group of people that I would count on to defend freedom are the Europeans.